Welcome to Jerusalem Unplugged, the only podcast dedicated to Jerusalem, its history, and its people. Your host, Roberto Mazza, will bring you guests discussing their relationship with the Holy City. A journey through history, society, feelings, and hopes for the future. Follow the podcast on all social media platforms at Jerusalem Unplugged.
Welcome to Jerusalem Unplugged, the podcast dedicated to Jerusalem, its history and its people. I'm your host, Roberto Mazza, and today it's with great pleasure that my guest is Izzeldin Abdulaziz Bukhari. Izzeldin is a self-taught chef and founder of Sacred Cuisine. Sacred Cuisine is a culmination of Izzeldin's life experiences that are deeply embedded in his Sufi roots. Sacred Cuisine embodies everything he values and aspires to instill. Originating from Bukhara, modern-day Uzbekistan, his family migrated to the old city of Jerusalem in 1616 to teach Sufism. As a young adult, Izzeldin moved to the United States and discovered his passion for cooking when missing Palestinian cuisine. So he experimented with recreating his favorite Palestinian dishes. It was then that he discovered cooking as a form of meditation for which he could lose himself and connect to the world around him. This was a transformative experience which allowed him to mindfully contemplate the world around him and inspiring his vision for sacred cuisine. He began then to notice where his ingredients came from, how they were grown, and what impact the dual process of their production and consumption had on the ecosystem. So upon returning to Palestine and Jerusalem, he decided to take Palestinian food, which is traditionally mostly plant-based, back to its roots of simplicity, versatility, and inclusiveness. But before we delve into all of this, first thing first, Izzeldin, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Roberto. I'm very happy to be on your podcast and very happy to share with you and your audience my mind and thoughts from Jerusalem Old City.
I'm very excited about it, particularly whenever we talk about food. I guess that's my Italian soul coming out. So, first of all, I want to ask you if you can tell us something about yourself and also about your relationship with Jerusalem.
So I'm Izzeldin Bukhari, born and raised in the old city of Jerusalem. Actually, my family immigrated from Bukhara in 1616, and we've been in the same house, same Sufi center since 1636. And all my family, for most of them, grew up in this house. My grandfathers and my father as well. I grew up in this house, which have a lot of history. But also it is part of the old city of Jerusalem where things can go very far in time, So things like 200 years, 300 years, 400 years, this is like the norm of the old city of Jerusalem. And also I lived in the United States for 7 years. And now I'm back in Jerusalem. And I'm here.
That's fascinating, particularly the idea that you can trace back so long back in time and, keep living in the old city despite all what happened to Jerusalem in the past few hundred years. So I'm curious about something. Your family, as you mentioned, traces back its origins in Bukhara, which is in modern day in Uzbekistan, just to place it on a map. And a place that I had the pleasure to visit almost a decade ago, and it's absolutely an amazing place.
Correct. True.
Bukhara was an important center on the Silk Road and a place where people met of different ethnicities, religions. Like you are obviously talking about Sufi culture from Bukhara. It's also true that there was a very important Jewish community, which is also represented in Jerusalem with a synagogue and I guess an old community that keeps the roots alive. Now, your family, as you said, migrated to Jerusalem in order to teach Sufism. I guess
Correct.
A lot of people may know about Sufism and Sufi, but I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about Sufism and also what Sufism means to you.
Yeah, sure. So Sufism, if we want to summary the description of Sufism, it's like the mysticism part of Islam. It is coming from the Islamic religion. It is part of the Islamic Sunni. There is also Sufi who are Shia, but for Sufism, it's also coming from the Sunni, like my family, and it focuses on using the tool of meditation to kind of cope with the stress of life, and it have the philosophy that you worship or you give thanks to the creator, to the universe, by in Sufism, they say if you really want to know the creation and God, you look uh, to the creation itself. You see how things are weaved and created very beautifully and perfectly. So Sufism is about appreciating all these elements of how the earth rotate, how the birds have different colors, how the diversity in the creation. So Sufism is giving thanks to the Creator and focusing on this element. And it is not to worship out of fear; it is to worship out of love. So this is like the fundamental part of Sufism. And in Sufism, what does it mean to me? Sufism is something that I'm still discovering, even though I come from a family where we are Sufi for 100 years at least. And Sufism, it's a big culture, and there is so much of different order, for example. So my family, we come from the Naqshbandi, but the most famous Sufi is by Al-Mawlawi order, Jalaluddin Rumi. But there is many other orders, and each order they have their own way how they do the meditation. They have a little bit of their own culture about which song they sing, which instrument you use, and such. So Sufism for me is something that's I'm still discovering and I'm still learning, and there is so much into it. But what I focus on Sufism is the essence of Sufism, because unfortunately, many religious leader they use the teaching to basically navigate people to certain way of thinking. So many religious leaders take advantage from teach us, and what I see, they always teach us what we have to say and what we have to do, but no, they don't teach us the essence. While in Sufism, it is based on essence, and that's what more interesting for me. So, for example, Jalaluddin Rumi, the poet, the one who created the whirling, the dancing. In one of his book, he was talking about very important, at least for me, but also in Sufism, aspect of your connection and relation with Sufism. And he was elaborating and saying that when they started the Sufism in their era, it was a philosophy based on worship out of love. And different scholars of Sufism they took their own way of walking this journey and interacting with it. And through their personal journey, order was created. So Jalaluddin Rumi, for example, he's the one who created the whirling. He's the one who created the whole culture of Mawlawi order and how it operates today. It was a self understanding towards Sufism and what does it mean to him. So he talked about this point that's most important in Sufism, even if you are following a teacher for Sufi, even if you are following a certain sheikh, it is very important also to find your connection between you and the creator and to have that direct connection, so you can also thrive in your own way and in your understanding and how you do meditation, for example, or how you connect to Sufism. And I think this is very crucial, especially in our time right now, where fast forward, about when Sufism was very popular and when Jalaluddin Rumi was living to now a time a lot of things change in life. So understanding the essence, it's allow me to reconnect with Sufism in my own understanding, in my own way, in a way that I can take it on every day to day life.
And we will talk later about the essence and Sufism related to food. But I wanted to ask you something in relation to Sufism in general, particularly looking at Jerusalem and Palestine. And I was wondering, what is your sense of the status of Sufism? Is still practiced throughout Jerusalem and Palestine? Is still part of Palestinian culture, or you see Sufism at the margins?
Unfortunately, Sufism is dying from the Arab world. Sufism, due to politics, it was attacked, it was targeted. Some people claim Sufism is not the true way of being a Muslim, and they criminalize every aspect of it. They said that the whirling is dancing, the music is singing, and they basically demonize it in a way to kind of be like Sufism is not a true practice of being Muslim. So this is, of course, have to do a lot with the politic, and the politic kind of were focusing very much to take Sufism from being the anchor of Islam. Because if we go back in time, during the Ottoman Empire time, let's say, it was the last leadership of the Muslims, Sufism was the main anchor. It was the focus of the Muslims. So, for example, in the old city of Jerusalem, we used to have 70 Sufi center. In the old city is very small place. So to have a 70 Sufi center, it can just give you the idea how much of heritage and culture of Sufism was existed, and how it was a thriving and a growing culture. And today, unfortunately, we have, what can I say, 2.5 Sufi centers that you can still see, and they still kind of existed. One is our neighbors, the Afghani, which is they still do the practice, and they are the only Sufi center in the old city of Jerusalem where they still do the practice and meditation on a weekly basis. Then our Sufi center, we lost 90% of our property due to corruption and due to gangsters. And what also left is the Indian hospice, the Indian Sufi center, where it is remain as it is as a place, but they don't do any practice. But you still can see the culture, the history, the picture, some of the text as and such. So this is to show you how what Sufism used to be and what Sufism is today.
We just ran a short series here at Jerusalem Unplugged on the Nebi Musa Festival with Awad Alabi and myself. And one of the most important celebration of the Nebi Musa Festival was actually, the presence and the rituals that were performed by Sufi in the Ottoman era, but even at the very earliest stages of the British Mandate. But unfortunately, all of that is gone, as you mentioned, mostly for political reasons. Let me move to 2017. And later we will talk about your experience in America. But in 2017, you opened your Sacred Cuisine. And the idea was to revive Palestinian Somi food. So first of all, can you speak about this idea of reviving this particular Palestinian food and what Somi means?
I got the question. So basically, Somi food is a food that we refer when the food is suitable for the Lent, for the Christian fasting. So in Christianity, the fasting they give up on a certain item for 40 days. It's different from different type of Christians, but mainly for the people who are in the Middle East, for most of them, not everyone, for most of them, they become vegan for this 40 days. So in this 40 days, they won't eat meat or the product of meat. And this practice, it brought so many dishes to our table. And most important and the best example of how this practice influence our table is by the falafel. So the falafel that everybody know worldwide, but not a lot of people know the story. But the story, it come from the Coptic of Egypt. Coptic are a Christian of Egypt. They wanted to create during the Lent a food that can be full of a protein and they can replicate it fast and also it's delicious. And this is from there they came up with this idea of falafel, but they make the falafel from fava bean, not from a chickpea. We kind of people in the Middle East, we took it and we substituted for chickpeas. It became more famous as a version, but the original of falafel start with with fava bean. So the cooktik, they wanted to create that recipe for that purpose. So this is what is Somi food. And also, what something very interesting and fascinating for me as a chef and a food historian and a person who loves food is there is a mechanism that they created with this practice. And this mechanism is basically veganize the dishes for that period of fasting. So most famous example of this is we have the grape leaves. I'm sure you tasted the grape leaves before, at least you know about it. It's a grape leaves that we roll with rice and ground beef or with rice and chickpeas. And when it is the fasting period, this is where they substitute the meat with the chickpeas. And they would call it wara dawali siyami, which basically mean grape leaves siyami, to emphasize and to let people know this food is safe or suitable to eat for Lent. Now, this culture is very rich, and there is so many stories and so many dishes came to life because of this practice, such as fattoush salad, which also have a story of interaction between Muslim and Christian over fasting, and baba ganoush even, and other dishes. But what I realize that this culture is dying. And we as a Palestinian forgetting about it. And even though the falafel still exists, people don't know the story, and even the grape leaves saw me it exist, they don't make the connection. So I decided, and especially in our world today, everybody is excited about vegan and vegetarian, and everybody is playing in that trend as if it is something new, something a human discovered recently. So what I'm trying to show is through highlighting Somi food, like this idea is way much older than what we think today. And our culture, we had this vegan aspect, or at least the vegetarian aspect of fasting. And I think it is very beautiful practice because not a lot of people are vegan and not a lot of people are vegetarian, but there is no in between. It can be like people eat meat or people don't. They are vegetarian and vegan, and it is like there is no in between. And what I like about the Somi practice, it is like, hey, do whatever you want, but at least at certain time reflect in your body and it tune in and cleanse it in a way. And I think this practice is very beautiful because it allow people to participate in it no matter what their diet restriction or their diet idea is. And I think this is will allow people to eat more vegetarian and to kind of enjoy that they can sustain themselves through the vegetarian and vegan food. So I decided to build a company focusing on Somi food, highlighting the story of Somi food. And even though I still eat meat, I decided my company not to cook any meat to kind of emphasize and highlight this concept. And that's why Sacred Cuisine was created, even from the name. I want to practice this. I want to highlight this practice, the Somi practice, but also I wanted to kind of collect different aspect of my interest and my who I am, my roots, and put it into the product I want to create as far as the initiative, my company. So my Sufi roots, I wanted also to include the spirituality and food and talk about it. And in this way, I had the idea of calling it sacred cuisine because I really want to highlight spirituality and healthy food, as well culture and the stories of food. And that's how sacred cuisine came to life and to be an idea.
So I want to take a step back and actually try to understand how did you become a chef? What were the ways in which you start relating yourself to food and making food then a profession? Or, as I understand, a sort of calling.
So, to be honest with you, falafel and hummus, they were the kick of my career to become a chef. And the reason is because I went to live in the United States of America, and after I moved there, in a very short period, I discovered that I'm addicted to hummus and falafel, which is, I didn't know. And I was like, oh, I cannot like survive without hummus and falafel. I want some hummus and falafel. So I was in Arizona at the time, and I will look for places who serve hummus and falafel, and I would go try them. And I was like, for the first time, realizing how our food or hummus and falafel can be executed very badly. So out of frustration, out of going to different places and trying to eat just okay hummus and falafel, and I came short in my results. I was like, okay, I will try to make it myself and like see what can I do. Like, is it that crazy difficult? And before that, I was like not really into cooking. Maybe I fried eggs, maybe I did like very simple thing, but I was not even interested in cooking or like I will eat, but that's about it. And when I start to make my own hummus and falafel, I just start to find the process of cooking is very meditative practice and very interesting how I behave in this energy when I'm cooking. I found myself that I'm disconnecting from the word, sinking in to cooking. At that time, I was like a person who is very hyper and very active, and I want things to kind of simulate me and patience was not on my agenda. I hate just to wait or be patient, it didn't make sense to me. I was like in my 23s, full of energy. And then I realized, wow, like when I'm cooking, focusing on patience is becoming something very easy for me. And just like this meditative energy and way of being when I'm cooking, I realized how it is very therapeutic and very something that's really my soul and my mind and my body. I become just like into it. So from there, I was very interested to see the cooking and what does it to me, what does it to me, and I found that is the most meditative practice that I can do, where I really feel like I'm connected to higher source, and this is about the creativity, it's about the taste, and at the end you have something to eat. So I became cooking more and more and discovering new dishes and cooking new dishes. And when I start to make my pita bread, the khubz, to eat the hummus and the falafel, I completely fall in love with cooking. And I was like, I want to focus on that and see where I can take it.
Your time in America essentially helped you to discover that in your heart, you were a chef in the making. But I want to bring you back to the old city of Jerusalem, because the old city of Jerusalem offers really an almost global culinary tour with foods coming from all around the world. And, going across the various religious traditions, you can find food from Europe, Africa, the Middle East. And I was wondering, to what extent the old city of Jerusalem and its food, other than hummus and pita and falafel, influence your cooking, and also if you can share with us the places and foods that influence your work and your taste.
So living in the old city and having visitors who come from all over the world. Some visitors who used to come visit my dad. My dad was very active in the community, in the international community also. So we had many visitors, and I always found myself as a tour guide since I'm a little boy. And also growing up with this and becoming a chef and I really start to see that how many people come to the old city of Jerusalem, get to experience the old city of Jerusalem, but for most of the time, they are experience it with a person through his lens or through his point of view, and this person not even from the whole country at all. And I start to see how many people come over here, go with very little taste of what it really is the old city, as far as culinary, as far as history, as far as culture. And I was like, wow, this is very sad for all these tourists to come over here and to come from sometimes the other part of the universe, the world, I mean, and they come over here and they get to experience the touristy aspect and the commercial aspect and very little of the real aspect. So when I start to do food tour, I decided that I want to expose uh, the visitors or the participants through different kind of things which they won't have the opportunity to if they are not with me. So, for example, everybody know hummus and everybody know falafel, but not a lot of people know about qudsiye or musabbaha or fatte, which is another hummus dishes you can get at a hummus place. And a lot of people know the falafel, but not a lot of people know the stuffed falafel, for example, you know? So, either from my hummus selection of different dishes to other places, I wanted to highlight these gems that's kind of somehow end up and known for the local, and not everybody from who come to visit get to experience. So people will go eat the hummus, but maybe they will not try the other dishes. So when I do my food tour, for example, one of the stops is the hummus, where we go and we try all the hummuses he can create in this shop. And this way, people be like, oh, I know hummus and I know falafel, but I didn't know about stuffed falafel or sabbaha or such. So that's my mechanism. That's what I build my work on. Even my cooking, even my menu is like, how can I expose people to things beyond makluba and shawarma and all the standard things that people know?
Absolutely. And I was just thinking when you're talking about my own experience as not a Jerusalemite. I never claimed to be one. I lived there, so I, sort of learned my way around. I experienced new foods which I didn't know before, and the influence also my understanding of Palestinian culture. And I got more and more curious about the origins of certain dishes. And for instance, in a couple of episodes, I delved into the question of the origins of certain dishes and how they traveled throughout the region and ended up being a Palestinian staple. I was thinking about knafe, for instance, its origins in Nablus, but also the various Jerusalemite version. And in each recipe, has its own history, and that history is a reflection of local cultures. And this is very important. And a lot of people, as you mentioned, often visit Jerusalem, but they leave Jerusalem without having experienced any of these. And in fact, like yourself, you're taking people on tours, and I'm thinking about Crystal with her own tours. And she was a previous guest of a podcast talking about Palestinian stories. And so, these are very important aspects, because as you mentioned, many people visit, but they only have this very superficial experience of Jerusalem as a city, its food, its history, and its people. And one of the reasons why actually this podcast was born was exactly that. Try to give people that may not be able to visit, but a sense of what's more. And I have a question, and might be a little bit provocative. You mentioned earlier that Sacred Cuisine focuses very much on vegetarian and vegan food. And I was wondering how hard is to remove meat from a culture that has made meat very central in its food and recipes.
This is the problem. It's like our food is so much vegetarian and vegan, and eating meat, nobody all over the world could afford to eat meat like what we are doing today. So meat was like the center of the table because it was a feast. When there is a feast happening, there is an occasion happening, there is something happening in the community. Someone getting married, certain very exciting thing happening in the community, and this is where people eat meat. So if you come to these feasts, if you come even to the stuffed lamb and these things took a place because it was not everyday life. It was something that's happened once, every month or so, and people will gather and eat that feast. And, just even like to elaborate on this idea of a stuffed lamb. A stuffed lamb is just show you how even if they want to eat meat, they want to stretch it out by stuffing it with rice and taking that flavor of meat and infuse it with the rice, but in the same time, making this dish of a stuffed lamb much more so it can feed the masses. So for example, you can grill a lamb, a whole lamb, but when you stuff it, there is more food. But what they stuffed it with rice to kind of stretch that meal for many mouses to feed. And this whole idea of we are eating meat that much, it came from our parents or our grandfather, where they felt like, oh, I was eating meat once every month or every week. And now I have the opportunity to buy it for my kids every day. They felt they are doing better and they're providing better for their family. So all of a sudden, people start to eat meat every day, and they're excited about it. So they cooking it on many different dishes. And now they are like, or Middle Eastern food in general, they're like, no, it's very meat heavily. But that's why when I step into food history and when I look into food history and I trace down these dishes, I found a lot of vegan dishes and a lot of vegetarian dishes that are very well executed. And when you eat them, you even forget that there is no meat, or you feel you don't even have meat. And that's, you don't even need to eat meat. And, today on my food tour, I just finished a food tour today, a few hours ago, and the participants on the food tour, they were saying like, we eat meat, but with your tour we were like so stuffed, and I didn't even like realize like was no meat in the tour, because we ate many delicious stuff which is satisfy us. And I think that's what I'm trying to encounter, the perception and what we think right now our food is, and bring back the roots and show how much vegetarian and vegan dishes we used to have.
And the same is very true also for Italian cuisine. If I look back at my parents and my grandparents, certainly they had the same values. Like they were coming from, particularly after World War II, from a very poor cuisine where nothing was available. And then Italian cuisine became very heavily meat oriented. But when you look back and you start looking at, basic and essential dishes, meat was never at the center unless it was the Sunday lunch, which was, sort of a traditional meal after, people going to a mass or after following a religious service. But other than that, most of the week was essentially based on carbohydrates, so pasta based and vegetables. And there's a trend now to recover that, because obviously this idea of meat consumption has been very much sort of based on this post-war era idea of wealth and rebirth, but it was not necessarily part of Italian cuisine before, probably for the rich, for the nobles, but not certainly for the people in general.
Yes, and actually, I forget the name of the disease in English, but in Arabic it's called the disease of kings. And this disease, it's basically when a person eat a lot of meat, their knuckles and their joints, I don't know how to explain it, but they become, they change in form, and they will take a weird shape, and this is because of the consumption of meat. And this disease was very popular between the kings, because at that time they're like, oh, you are the king, you eat meat every day, and he was like, and they will eat a lot of meat and they will end up with this disease. And they call it the disease of kings. I will look it up and send it to you so I can include it in the description if you like. What's the name of the disease in English or in Latin? But yeah, this is just to kind of give you to give an idea for you and the audience and everyone, like how the association was to eat meat was not for everyone, every person, normal.
I believe the name is gout. At least I know in Italian it's called gotta, so I think in English should be gout. But it's definitely very popular. There were kings who died of that, as we were trying to show that they were able to eat so much meat, and obviously they were very rich and wealthy, without thinking that actually that was not really healthy at all.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I want to ask
exactly.
you something about
Yes.
your food tours, because obviously sacred cuisine is about food, but it's also about tours. And so I was wondering if you can speak about the tours, how they are organized, and what kind of experience people may live throughout the tour.
So the tour, it's designed as I said, to expose people to things that they might not eat when they are in Palestine, or they are like visiting because they will go to more commercial stuff. So it's really based, the item, everything I choose is something that's, for most of the time, it will be new for the participants. This is number one. Number two is to give them opportunity to walk into my footsteps. And where do I shop? Where do I eat? Where do I go to source my ingredients, so it's really beneficial for people who come to visit, but also more for the people who is living over here from the expats community who work in NGO, diplomat mission and such. They live over here, and basically for this 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, they are like local because they need to buy things, they need to cook, they need to live their life. So I help them to kind of like find the best spots where they can treat them nicely, not as a tourist and jack them with the prices. Put them in the hands of people who are trustful and they care about their passion, and allow them to know these resources so they can utilize it. So either from the hummus places to the tahini place where they make the tahini, to the farmers, what they have with them and how they can utilize it, and many of these greens which can be foreigner to others. So I focus on that so for the 3 hours of a journey, which is my food take for the participants, is to kind of include the spices, the tahini, the grains, the farmers market, the places where they provide some of the best things to eat in the old city of Jerusalem. So it's really designed in that way.
I'll book a spot for my next trip to Jerusalem, inshallah, very soon. Let me ask something.
Very happy. Yeah.
You have been very successful. You've been featured in a number of media. You work with very famous chefs. And I was wondering, did all of this attention change your cooking and your philosophy of cooking?
I would say, yeah. I didn't, to be honest with you, when I start Sacred Cuisine and when I start to cook food, I thought like, okay, in food, what you do, you cook food and you sell it. So was like the main thing. And as I start to operate, I found and improvise to kind of fill needs in the community for the participants. And this food experiences came to my mind to see there is what is missing in the market and how I can elaborate on the Palestinian cuisine culture through food. So basically, improvising and going with the flow helped me to kind of navigate in a better way. And I start to see myself always in a role that I elaborate about food culture and food history. So I start to see the value of the culture itself, talking about it beyond the food. So it pushed me, like I never thought even about food historian, I didn't think of this title, or this being, to focus on your work as a food history. So when I discovered the story of falafel, I was very happy. So if I want to go back a little bit, I went around to ask people, what's the story of falafel? I was like, as an idea, it came out from very thoughtful recipe. What's the purpose behind it? And when I didn't find people giving me answers, I continued in a search till I found the story. And when I found the story, I was very happy. In the same time, I was very devastated. I was very happy that I know the story of falafel and I can share it with the world. But I was very devastated to see how much we as a Palestinian or Middle Eastern or Arab, that's we don't know the story of an item that's almost we eat every day. Didn't make sense to me. And I was like, if I want to talk about my food, I should at least know its history and dive into it. And this is what kind of like it was a breaking point in my career to kind of be like, I want to learn my career and I want to study it and I want to take it every part of it, from ingredient to dishes to tools to architecture to everything have to do with food and know it. And this has became a duty that I took on myself with very high interest. I didn't do it because I don't have an interest. I did because I was very interested and curious about this food history. And every time you find a story about certain dish, it just make the dish even taste better. And just like it's very exciting. So I would say I found in myself to be working with high profile people or high profile chefs, celebrity chefs, people who doing amazing work and have a very vast reach. And when I'm doing the work with them, I also will ride on that wave, and I start to see how it is big responsibility that I have to carry on. So it kind of shaped me to kind of have a real value in the work I do and to include the academic part of it and to take it as if I'm studying in the university. And that's what exactly I took on myself because of all these interaction, because of all these media and such. But also, I would say like this is start to happen more and more when people start to hear about me and to see my work. They are like, okay, this guy have the story of falafel. He talk about the history of food. He talk about vegetarian food. So I feel all these elements help to kind of take my name and spread it around. And many media outlet, many chefs, they wanted to come and know about the Palestinian food, but I never expect to be expert on Palestinian food. And I would say, and I always say to people, I'm like, I'm on the beginning of the journey. There is so much still I didn't know, but I'm discovering it and I'm sharing it with you. But yeah, I would say it gave me a big responsibility and an essence of focusing on my work and uh, putting this increase the value of my work because of this responsibility.
I have a couple of more questions, and one of them is really about what you were talking about, the question of Palestinian food. So, in the context of current Israeli politics, what we can see is an attempt to essentially erase Palestinian culture. Now, paradoxically, when we talk about food, more than erasure, we can see appropriation. So, what is
Yep.
traditionally Palestinian then becomes somehow Israeli. And I don't want to take away anything from, for instance, the tradition of Arab Jews that brought Arab food, which is very similar in many ways to Palestinian food. But obviously, we're talking about something different here. And you're trying to do the opposite, which is to show Palestinian food in light of Palestinian culture and sort of preserving Palestinian identity through food. So I was
Yes.
wondering, how is it going so far? And how do you see the near future of this, shall we say, fight?
That's a good question. A lot of people ask me this question, to be honest, and I always found myself, especially when media and big media outlet, they're always looking for that catchy aspect. And I always tell people like I didn't in my career. All I wanted is to cook food and elaborate about food. So I'm not trying to encounter politic, or I'm not trying to encounter the appropriation of the food and such. But I always find myself in that spot. It's because when you dig into history and we talk about history, you're talking about facts. And I see, this can be a very good way to reply to certain claims. So, for example, Palestinian and Israeli fighting over falafel, say the falafel is ours, and this. For me, when I tell the story of falafel, I over here kind of settle the argument, without even going to the argument. Because I'm not interested to go to a person who is lying or a thief and try to tell them what you're doing is wrong. They chose their path in life and it's focusing on these elements. For me, I want to focus on my work. But when I do, it's you are bringing the true history of certain food. So, for example, Makluba. Makluba is a very Palestinian dish between all the other dishes that grow in the Middle East and was like influenced from city to country to other places. Makluba, it came from the old city of Jerusalem. And Makluba, I mean, the name of Makluba, it changed in the old city of Jerusalem. And there is a big history as far as makluba and food and Palestinian dish. So makluba is a truly Palestinian dish. And recently, some Israeli chefs, they were talking about makluba, how it was Israeli dish and blah, blah. So when you go back to the story of makluba, Salah ad-Din Ayyubi, when he came and he defeated the Crusaders in Jerusalem, he's the one who changed the name of it from Bitinjaniye to Maqluba, and it was not intentional, it just like happened. But like when my friends they were like contacting me, they're like, "Look, the Israelis are doing something about Maqluba, so maybe you should just say the story." And I always say the story of Maqluba and like different. But you know, I never have a piece about it or such. And through a work like this, you are encountering this appropriation. And it is very important to understand the dynamic also, because Palestine had Christian, Muslim, and Jews who lived in this land. So you had Jews who were eating hummus and making hummus, and also makluba and other dish because they were living, you know, as you know, the Christian and the Muslims. So, but at that time they were living in Palestine. They had a Palestinian document. I mean, even Yehuda Elmert, she's have a Palestinian passport because all the Jews who came before, they came to Palestine, and this was the place to exist, you know, and even through the British mandate, it was called Palestine. So in this land, there was no difference between Jew, a Christian, and a Muslim. All of them were living together harmoniously. And there is even like some family, they would talk about this period as Jewish and Christian. They were like, you won't even know there was a difference. So all these people cooked all different type of dishes from the area. So you cannot say Jewish didn't cook hummus or Palestinian food and such, but they were Palestinian at the time. And Israel, it's a country that was established after 1948. And in the same time, it tried to, as you said, to delete the Palestinian history. And they were claiming like Palestine didn't exist. There was nothing called Palestine, but there's also something to mention that all these borders that we are seeing today, these borders were created by the British and by Europe, and all the flags that we carry today, it was also created by them. So after the Second World War II, they installed these leaders, who most of them are dictators, and they give them new borders and they give them a new flag. Before that period, this whole area of Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine. It was called Bilad al-Sham. There was like the area of Palestine, but there was like no specific borders. So this whole idea of borders, it's something new to the Arab world and such. And that's what a lot of people don't know, and they don't get to that side of the conversation. It's because our Arab world was shaped by European colonizers and put it in a different way and install leaders who are dictators to make sure they protect their foreigner interest with the European and with the colonizer. And I mean, this is one of the way why Sufism died, why many things changed, because these leaders, their work and what they did is basically oppress the people and oppress the tools and take it from them, the individual, and make them dependent on these governments and such. Like there is so much layers in the subjects that is we have like to tackle it to be able to get the big picture. But appropriating of the Palestinian food, it is not something new, you know. It is like when I was living in Arizona in United States of America. I knew some people who are racist. They don't like Mexican, even though they are in Arizona, which was a Mexican land, you know. And if you want to go even further, America is a stolen land from the Native American, you know. And they're like, oh, I hate Mexican, but I love tacos, you know. And just like many countries and many occupiers, they took certain food from other people and they claimed it. And I think this mechanism, it is not old mechanism, but right now in our era, we are facing it so much in Palestine. And it is very fascinating and interesting to see certain mechanism and a certain system hating on the people but love their food. So how they can tackle with it? Just call it Israeli food, and this is way you still can eat it and you still can enjoy it. In the same time, you are Israeli and you don't need to go to the other side.
It's exactly the point. Like the full erasure. Once you take it, you make it your own, you don't have to look the other side.
I just want to elaborate on a very important aspect as far as appropriation, because dishes, it is the understanding of our ancestor and the way how they utilize the land. So our ancestor basically, they didn't have a grocery store they can get ingredients from everywhere. They had their local things that grow in their land. So cooking and the cuisine basically, it is the wisdom of our ancestor, how they took the green, how they took the chickpeas, how they took the fava, how they took all these dishes and weaved it together to make these dishes. It was basically the improvising of our ancestor to know how to work with the land. So it is a very important aspect because it show your connection with the farming. You show your connection with the local produce and what you did with it, and how this to appropriate the food, it can get them closer to be like, oh, we know the land, we understand the land, and we work with the land because this is the ingredient was given us.
So, as a last question, I want to ask you about a reflection on Jerusalem. And I was wondering, in your view, which are the three dishes that you can think of are best representing the city of Jerusalem?
Which are the three top dishes that they present Jerusalem?
Yes, in your view.
Okay, that's man a good question. Wow. No. Now we put me in hot spot to choose, top three. I would say, stuffed falafel or falafel, or you know what, falafel and hummus. It's because in the old city of Jerusalem, falafel and hummus are way different than every part of Palestine. It's truly where we believe that's the masters of hummus and falafel are. So I will tackle these two as one. I will say the hummus and falafel. Other item is the kaik, the bread that we do over here that's made with a lot of sesame and it is very crunchy from the outside and very foamy from the inside. It's the icon of the old city of Jerusalem and it is one of the most famous ingredient, or not ingredient, most famous bread in the old city of Jerusalem. But the third one, it will be tricky because there is different thing I can include. So I would say, this is a bit more going back in time. It's like a freekeh soup, for example. A freekeh soup, freekeh, it's a grain coming from wheat. It's a green roasted wheat, basically, that's we dry, and then we make a soup out of it. And this soup is very simple. It's made out of onion and some mini meatballs of ground beef. But this dish, it's come and is still served by the soup kitchen, which is the Asian soup kitchen, what we call it kiye, which is a soup kitchen was created by the Ottoman Empire. So during the Ottoman Empire time, they created the soup kitchen where designed, or it is basically community kitchen designed to give food for the people who are less fortunate. And their main they serve different kind of food, but the freekeh soup, it's like one of the tastes of the old city of Jerusalem in particular, especially in my father time, let's say, and many people still remember that taste. But fast forward today, it's less known, or like between the Palestinians, of course, it's very known, but like it's not a lot of people go to the tkiya, let's say, to eat it like how they used to. So I would say the new item for nowadays is Urbs Bayt, which basically something between a pizza and a quiche. It's made out of a dough similar to pita bread. It's have some eggs. They put some sausage, meat in it, and a cheese. or they make it vegetarian when they put the za'atar leaf and other vegetable. And this item is a true item of the old city of Jerusalem because this is our social club where we hang out in the old city of Jerusalem when we were kids. We will go to the bakery who is preparing to make the cake and the bread. In between all that time of mixing and rising the bread and such, he will make these ras bayt, circle little mini pizza, let's say, and they are something truly of the old city of Jerusalem. And they were mentioned recently in New York Times, actually. They were they even mentioned one of the places who is mentioned it, and it's also an item on my food tour.
This was Izzeldin Abdulaziz Bukhari, chef and founder of Sacred Cuisine. Izzeldin, thank you so much.
My pleasure, truly an honor. Thank you for this opportunity, Roberto.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, please share it with others on social media or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook @Jerusalem Unplugged. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.